Empower Radio presents Out of the Fog. Join intuitive guide and spiritual teacher Karen Hager for lively, positive conversation with light workers, healers, and dynamic wisdom keepers. Get ready for inspiration and connection. This is Out of the Fog on Empower Radio. Here's your host, Karen Hager.
Hello and welcome to Out of the Fog. I'm Karen Hager. Each week at this time we gather for spiritual conversation and enlightening guests, and I am glad you're here. Time and distance are no barrier to energy, and that means that no matter when you're listening, no matter how you found us, you are here for a reason. And I hope that something in the next hour sparks a change in you and helps you move forward. Chronic pain has become an international epidemic. An estimated 1 billion people across the globe are suffering every day. My guest on today's show is Dr. Mitchell Yass. He's the author of The Pain Cure RX, and he believes that by understanding what's causing your pain, you can achieve complete and lasting relief. Are you ready to meet him? Dr. Mitchell Yass has spent the past 20 years developing his method of diagnosing and treating the cause, not the symptom, of pain, and he believes that this is the future of pain relief. He currently treats patients in Florida utilizing his unique method. He's the author of Overpowering Pain and hosted the radio show Stop the Pain, I Want My Life Back. He's written articles for various publications, including Advance for Physical Therapists and PT Assistants, Bottom Line Health, and CureBackPain.org, and he's been featured on numerous radio shows. You can find out more about Dr. Yass and his work at mitchellyass.com. Dr. Yass, welcome to Out of the Fog.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Karen. I think the name of your show is exactly what my intent is for the area of chronic pain. There is a huge fog which has been created by the medical establishment, and we need to create clarity and help people get out of that fog, understand what they need to do to identify what's actually creating their pain, and that will give them the tools to resolve it. So this is a great opportunity, and I greatly appreciate that.
No, it's wonderful to have you on. That epidemic of pain, and I think of just the people in my own life who I know who suffer. We're talking now about 1 billion people, more probably, around the world. What is the reason for this epidemic? What's happening here?
Well, the amazing part of the whole situation is that, unfortunately, people are suffering not by their own determination. It is actually the medical establishment's use of diagnostic tests which lead to improper diagnoses. Once the improper diagnosis is created, then all treatments that follow thereafter are invalid, and as a result of that, the proper tissue that's creating the pain is not being addressed, and so people are just sustained on this pain cycle. And when certain treatments don't work, this is what could lead people to pain management. I really think that the best example for people to understand in a very simple way is the idea of, let's just say someone's having pain at their lower back, and it turns out that a muscle in spasm is creating it. A lower back muscle is in spasm creating that pain. I think most people would acknowledge that's a possibility. Well, the typical method is for the individual to go to a physician who then recommends an MRI be taken, and let's say that the MRI finds stenosis or a herniated disc or an impinged nerve. I think most people who have been diagnosed with these type of structural variations. So what happens is that these types of structural variations become the center point of all treatment. So you might get some conservative treatments which are designed to mask the symptoms. So maybe you'll get some epidural nerve blocks, maybe you'll get some pain medication, maybe some other alternative forms of treatment. When these don't fail, when they fail and they're unable to resolve the cause of the pain, the person then goes on, and unfortunately, this might lead to getting surgery. Well, the surgery doesn't work because it's still not identifying the tissue that's emitting the pain. So this could lead to a future surgery, another surgery, or possibly even pain medication. So as time's progressing, you're going 5, 10 years, the person's still having pain, and they're in this incredible confusion as to why is it that I've done all this, seen all these medical practitioners, and yet I'm still in pain. And the answer is clearly that the actual tissue, which was the muscle and spasm, has never been identified, therefore not properly treated. So when you kind of look at that, you can see that concept throughout the course of the body, whether it's arthritis at the shoulder, bursitis, whether it's arthritis at the hip or a labral tear, whether it's arthritis or a meniscal tear at the knee or any other joint. What's happening is that diagnostic tests have become the primary mechanism for diagnosing the cause of pain, and the reality is they are completely invalid. There is absolutely no correlation between the identification of these structural variations and pain. And so, in fact, what's happened is they've actually tried to correlate the intensity of people's pain to the intensity of the structural variation, and that hasn't been able to be correlated. So literally there is no correlation between these structural variations and pain. They're literally an independent variable, and yet that's what's being treated. So what I decided to do was create a system which actually interprets people's symptoms. The body wants you to try to understand what tissue is creating the pain. And so my system, by interpreting the symptoms, is open to all potential causes of pain, whether it's bone, muscle, or nerve, and this allows you to get the proper diagnosis by identifying the proper treatment. If it's muscular, only targeted strength training can resolve that pain, which can do it in a very short period of time, a couple of weeks. So the thing I've always tried to get across to people is that all the surgeries in the world will never resolve a muscular cause, and all the exercise in the world will never resolve a structural cause. The key to getting the right diagnosis is determining which is it. Is it structural or muscular? And there is overwhelming evidence that at least in 85 to 90% of cases, the cause is muscular-based. So based on the way the system is being treated with diagnostic tests which are incapable of identifying muscular causes, you can imagine just how many people are being misdiagnosed and therefore mistreated. And that is what has led to this epidemic. And the reality is, as long as it stays like this, the epidemic isn't going to go away. It's only going to intensify. And that's what led me to the path that has gotten me to where I am. And I hope to be the individual who creates a revolution in how pain is diagnosed and treated by my method. And I hope to unify the system so that all medical practitioners follow my system. I think this is what will lead to a quick, proper diagnosis, a quick ability to resolve pain, and we can finally turn the epidemic around.
And I'm hearing you say, so if I just grabbed a bunch of people and I gave them MRIs, that I might find those structural abnormalities, wherever those were, that I might find those even in people who did not identify themselves as having pain.
Absolutely. So one study, let's take one study, shows that over the age of 60, 90% of these people who have absolutely no back pain were found to have bulging or degenerative discs. We have the American College of Physicians in 2007 identifying in a 20-year literature search that over 85% of people who had lower back pain, that pain could not be attributed to a spinal abnormality like a herniated disc or stenosis. They actually pointed out that one of the reasons they were so concerned about the use of the MRI is the fact that these structural variations are being found strictly because of a cause that happens to be in the area unrelated to it, but the identification of these structural variations and the intricate words that are associated with them have caused such stress to people and have led them simply by the identification to have these issues addressed, which has led to unnecessary costs and treatment. This is the American College of Physicians identifying this. So I can assure you I am by all means not alone in my understanding. The Cleveland Clinic in their arthritis advisor newsletter a couple of years ago actually said most back pain is muscular. In their most recent newsletter, they actually have now put no question about their concerns and have said that the MRI is incapable of identifying structural causes such as herniated disc or arthritis versus muscular causes in terms of causing back pain, and this is what has led to the failure in back surgery. So there are innumerable medical organizations who are acknowledging this. Now, the funny part is this has been going on since 1994. The first study on healthy people with no pain, which showed that 70% of people who have no back pain have herniated or bulging discs. That this has been an issue that's been going on for 20 years. The concern regarding the validity of the MRI, but the reality was, well, okay, if we're not going to use the MRI, then what's the alternative? And since no alternative has been presented, as far as I'm concerned, that's what's led to the continuation of a system that clearly is presented as not being valid. That's why I feel so blessed that I've been able to create the system that I have.
Well, and as we age, as we come into this time period now where all the baby boomers, right, we're all coming into a certain age here, there will be more and more complaints of pain, I would assume, as a natural part of aging, right, and how we use our bodies. And yet we're going to focus on the structural stuff when we should be focusing on the true cause of the pain.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one point that I really want to get across to people who are older. This idea that aging and infirmity go hand in hand is a complete fallacy. I don't want anyone to believe, I should be in pain because I'm getting older. It's actually the fact that due to getting to retirement age, you end up doing less activity, which causes your muscles to weaken more, which makes them more susceptible to straining when you do choose to do an activity. So your fitness level, your functional capacity is all based on the strength of the muscles required to perform those activities. So if you want to age in a way where you're not becoming infirmed, well, you're going to have to take responsibility for yourself, and that means that you're going to have to perform some sort of weight training program. And what I'm talking about, I think the concern that people have is that they're considering, you're talking about going to a gym 7 days a week and hours on end. I'm talking about a 2 to 3 day a week program where you're doing no more than 20 minutes to a half hour of exercise, which will allow you to sustain the strength in all the muscles required to perform your functional activities. This is what will, number one, prevent the muscles from straining and emitting pain, possibly causing the muscles that weaken and become imbalanced at times to cause misalignment of joint surfaces, which is what leads to pain in joints as a majority of cases. But more importantly, it will also lead to stability of joints, which will actually limit the chance for deterioration of your joints, of your discs, of all the structural aspects. It turns out that the actual cause to the deterioration of the structures is actually the same as the ones creating the actual pain you're experiencing, which is weakness of the muscles that are required to perform functional activities. Those very same muscles are required to create stability of joints. So if you don't have strength and balance, that's why you get abnormal forces that lead to some deterioration of the joints. So if you want to stop arthritis from developing, if you want to stop stenosis or herniated discs or meniscal tears or any of this type thing from occurring, it's real easy. Create the strength necessary to both maximize your function, but also to maximize the stability of the joints. And you could stop all this deterioration from happening as well. It's a twofold issue. Resolve your pain, achieve maximal stability of joints, and that combined will lead towards maximal functional capacity, regardless of what your age is.
What I like about what you're saying from my wacky spiritual viewpoint is that this is so important in empowering people who may come to you clutching their MRI results, going, look, this is what's wrong with me. They fixed it, but I'm still in pain. There's so much fear. There's a sense of being disempowered by the medical establishment because of the medication that we're maybe given, or because we're told we did the surgery, you shouldn't be in pain anymore, and yet we're still in pain. The kind of taking responsibility that you're talking about is tremendously empowering, not just physically, but as I see it, it's energetically as well. That's the power to change your life, the power to regain balance on more levels than just the physical, really.
Oh, I don't disagree with that at all. I agree 100%. Pain is not necessarily just some sort of physical thing that occurs. Sustained pain, chronic pain, destroys the emotional state of somebody, a sense of, think about this. Everybody wants to wake up in the morning and say, wow, I can't wait to have a great day. Well, imagine if every day you wake up knowing this is going to be another day where I'm not going to be able to move, I'm not going to be able to function, I can't be a good husband, a wife, a child, a coworker. I can't do anything I want because I know that pain's going to be there. That destroys people emotionally and spiritually. And what's amazing is it then has this cyclical effect. When you start destroying people emotionally and spiritually, well, that's going to have an effect on them physically. It just wears people down. There's no question that things like stress and depression have a direct effect on physical capacity, on how the body functions physically. So that's the problem. This thing becomes cyclical. And that's why chronic pain is such a terrible thing to have. It's one thing if you have some illness of a organ. You see, they identify the organ, they address the organ, boom, it's done. But when you can't find the actual cause of your pain and that pain just persists, you have this sensation of just not feeling like you're out of control, and that I can't tell you how many people have said to me, thank God I found out about you, because now I believe there is a light at the end of the tunnel. That's everybody's dream, everybody's hope that's suffering from chronic pain. They want to know that one day they're going to wake up and it's not going to be there. So its effect on people emotionally, functionally, I've seen lives destroyed. When you talk about older population, that pain can eventually lead to the point where people can't weight bear. When you can't weight bear, you can't walk. You can't get up from a chair. You can't know that you're going to be stable. And you know what that leads to potentially? A sense that you cannot sustain your independence, which means that there's always the potential that you might have to be moved into an assisted living home. For older people, I've spent enough time working with them. That is probably the greatest fear anybody has. So the connection between the physical nature of pain and dysfunction and the emotional and spiritual is very, very strong, and it needs to be addressed. The sense that there is hope, that there is an actual mechanism, even before people are out of pain, knowing that has already begun the cycle of healing. So that's why it's so important for people to recognize there is now a legitimate mechanism for properly diagnosing what tissue is emitting that pain. And listen, even if it's structural, hey, tomorrow, let's go get you that surgery that you need, and then we'll do some post-operative exercise, and within a few weeks you'll be better. So whether it's muscular or structural, as long as the proper tissue is diagnosed and the appropriate treatment created, you know that within a few weeks to a month or two, you should be pain-free.
Wow. So when you connect with a patient, Dr. Yass, and you say that in the book, the first thing that you do is throw out all the diagnostic tests. So you have your own method of assessing patients in terms of balance and strength and flexibility. Can you talk a little bit about how you would do that?
Yeah, I want to give you one of the classic examples of the way people are manipulated into getting a hip replacement. I think people can really grab onto this understanding. So what happens is the average, and this is the most frequent symptom associated with why someone gets a hip replacement. Let's say you get pain in your groin region. So you have the pain and it's affecting your ability to weight bear or walk or some sort of weight-bearing activity. You go to the doctor. They take an x-ray. They find some sort of arthritic change in the hip. A correlation is made. You have pain in the groin. You have arthritis of the hip. Therefore, the arthritis is causing the groin pain. Let me just very briefly hit that and show you why that's so dangerous, the idea of correlation. You never want to use correlation. So here's the idea. So let's say an example of a correlation is that I'm at my front door, and I open the door just as the sun rises. Tomorrow, I open the front door just as the sun rises. The next day, I open the front door just as the sun rises. So what we can now say is me opening the front door causes the sun to rise. That's correlative theory. And I want people, you laugh and people say, oh, that's so goofy. That's the exact system that's being used to attribute that arthritis to your to your pain in the groin. It is simply the fact that they are in the same location. Okay, now let's go back to how the Yass Method works to identify whether that's legitimate or not. Okay, so they're saying that the pain is coming from the hip, which means that the pain is what is known as referred, meaning that the pain is in one location but the cause is in the other. The pain is in the groin, the location of the cause is the hip joint. So if you were to want to incite that pain, where would you expect to have to press to try to create the symptom? Well, that would be at the location where the cause is, which is the hip joint. So I would have to press on your hip joint, and you should say, oh, my God, I feel that shoot to my groin. Well, you could do that, and you'll find out in almost everybody that's not what happens. I can press on your hip joint as much as I want, and I don't create that pain. Now let's go to pressing in the groin region. Well, now if I press in the groin region where the pain is, and I push down, and you say, oh, my God, geez, that's it. That's what hurts so much. Well, what's happened is I've just showed you that I'm pressing in the location where the pain is. That's known as point tender pain. Point tender pain implies that the tissue I'm pressing on is the tissue eliciting the pain. Well, it turns out that there's 3 muscles that attach right in that groin region, and most likely what's happened is you've strained one of those muscles, and therefore it's eliciting the pain. So simply by differentiating your pain as being point tender and not referred, I have just proven, based on your body's presentation, that that correlation indicating that the arthritis in the hip joint is the cause of that groin pain is 100% invalid. And this case, the idea of doing a total hip replacement would do nothing, zero, to offset the pain being experienced in the groin. So look at the difference in the system. One system, the existing system, finds a structural variation which has been there and occurring. That degeneration has occurred so slowly and progressively, it's occurred over 20, 30 years. You don't even know it's there until a muscle creates pain in the region, which then forces a test to be done. If you had never got, the day before you got that pain, you didn't know that you had that arthritic change there, right? Nobody knew that because you were functioning and it wasn't eliciting pain. It was only because the muscle in the groin caused pain and strained, which elicited the X-ray to show that arthritic change. So that's why the use of this type of diagnostic testing is invalid. But by using your body's presentation, which is everything I just described to you in terms of how you determine whether something is a referred symptom or a point tender symptom, is presented in the book. The goal of the book is to give the reader the exact mechanism that I, as the doctor, would have used to identify the cause of your pain. It is literally as if I'm sitting on your shoulder and I'm saying, okay, press on the hip joint and see if you get pain in the groin. You don't. Okay. Now let's press in the groin and see if that elicits pain. Okay, it does elicit pain. Now let's try to identify which muscle is in the area where you're having. So we'll look at an illustration, something of that nature. So literally, I have tried to create in the book my diagnostic method, and because there are, like you said, about 1 billion people in the world that have pain, and I knew I couldn't treat them all, there was no way I could get across this message by treating people in an office, so I needed to create a mechanism that would allow people to have the same exact ability to diagnose as I would, but by doing it themselves. So that's a great example. Hopefully people really get the understanding of how using the body's presentation, I was able to tell that that groin pain had nothing to do with the hip versus the doctor simply trying to convince you of it by the identification of arthritis, which clearly is not causing that pain.
And the book does what we were talking about earlier. The book does give tools. So even when I hold this book in my hand, there's hope, right? Because I can go in there, I can use the method. This book has got a ton of photographs, which I love. People who listen to this show know that I love the practical stuff. So I want to be able to write in the book. I want to be able to see pictures. I want to have practical steps. This book has got photos. It's got exercises that you can do to kind of feel this out for yourself. So just by holding this book in my hand, I'm empowered. There is light at the end of the tunnel.
There's just no question about it. I thought this was kind of a cool thing. So I've been going on a tour doing public television pledge drives to reinforce, that the book is out. and to create awareness of the method. And in one location, it turns out that they've decided that they want to make sure that there's validity to the type of information being provided, and they actually have a physician who has to look at the video, the actual show, and confirm that he feels that it is valid, or else they won't even present the show. And apparently this guy was so impressed, the comments that were left were extensive, and the show was allowed to air. And to me, that's a sign of validity. I will put my method up against anybody who wants to see whether what I'm saying is the appropriate method for utilizing the body's presentation of people's symptoms to be able to identify what tissue is eliciting the pain. I think what I'm really presenting is nothing more than what generally I think most people understand as how the body works. I mean, if the tissue's in distress, then it tries to elicit a pain signal as a way of creating a conscious awareness that the tissue is in distress so that an intervention can be created. That's why we have pain. Well, now you just want to try to establish what tissue is emitting that pain. Clearly, that is the basis of diagnostics, because without identifying the proper tissue, the proper treatment can't be performed. So this is the system that I kind of created right after I went to medical school and said, you know, what they taught was just not valid. And in terms of a theoretical basis, well, it's strong enough that it can pass a physician's review to make sure that it's able to be seen on public television. In terms of, if you want to understand from a clinical point of view, well, I've treated about 14,000 people with about a 90 to 95% success rate.
Wow.
From a scientific point of view, there are unending numbers of studies that show that the existing model utilizing diagnostic tests is invalid. When they talk about that 85% of cases of pain at the lower back not being able to be attributed to spinal abnormalities, the only reason why they describe it as non-specific is for the very reason I described, which is the fact that muscle causes don't show up. So if they don't show up, they can't actually call it something. So they simply call it non-specific.
Now the clock is catching us here, and we're right down at the bottom of the hour. You're listening to Out of the Fog with Karen Hager. We're in conversation with Dr. Mitchell Yass, and we'll be right back after this.
Come to the forest. It's a place not so far away. A place where you don't have to mow the lawn or babysit.
I saw lizards and squirrels and ducks, ladybugs, caterpillars. It's really cool, actually.
A place where you don't have to make time for free time.
Lots and lots of kinds of species here.
Out here, you may even meet the mysterious creature known as the other you. The enchanted you.
It's magic what flowers do.
The adventurous you.
My favorite tree, yes, that one.
The free-to-be-me you. Ask your parents to take you to this not-so-far-away place. Come to the forest, where the other you lives. But first, stop by discovertheforest.org, a public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Hey, Larry, mind if I sit down?
Nope.
This coffee tastes like coffee. So what's going on?
Not much.
What's new?
Not much.
Okay, but can you please put the newspaper down while you say not much?
What newspaper?
This newspaper. Oh, dude. What happened to your face? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Ow.
Dude, what is this? 11 pieces of toilet paper stuck to your face?
I'm shaving in the dark to save energy. I'm helping the environment.
That's a dangerous way to help the environment.
Well, sometimes you have to sacrifice yourself for the greater good.
Dude, there's an easier and safer way to help the environment without sacrificing yourself. Go green, go public. Take public transportation. It's good for the environment, and you won't have to live behind a newspaper.
Wow.
But for now, put the newspaper back up.
A message from the public transportation systems across the country. To learn more, visit publictransportation.org.
I'm home, and I love it. I'm home where I belong. I'm home, and I love it. I'm home where I belong.
It's always nice to come home. But these days, many Americans are at risk of foreclosure and losing their homes. Fortunately, help is available. Making Home Affordable is a free program from the U.S. government that has already helped over 1 million struggling homeowners, and we want to help you.
I'm home, and I love it. I'm home.
Find out now what your options are. Go to makinghomeaffordable.gov or call 1-888-995-HOPE. The sooner you act, the better chance we can help you.
I'm home, where I belong.
Brought to you by the U.S. Treasury, HUD, and the Ad Council.
And now back to Out of the Fog with Karen Hager on Empower Radio. EmpowerRadio.com.
Welcome back to Out of the Fog. I'm Karen Hager, and I'm talking with Dr. Mitchell Yass. His new book is The Pain Cure RX, and we've been talking about how by diagnosing and treating the cause of pain, not structural but muscular, that we can take back our power over our own health and avoid unnecessary surgery, avoid that very destructive cycle of chronic pain. You can find out more about the Yass Method and about Dr. Yass and his work at mitchellyass.com. That's MITCHELLYASS.com. And of course, I always love to get your comments and questions, your feedback on what you're hearing here. Has chronic pain affected your life? Are you interested in, looking forward to taking measures to bring some of that power back into your own hands? You can always reach me through my website at KarenHager.com. I would love to hear from you. Now, Dr. Yass, we were talking before we went to the break about the way in which once we realize, once we isolate the muscle that is causing the pain, that we can begin to now take steps to treat that pain and alleviate it rather quickly. And I'm wondering, because when you say to me, okay, it's a muscular cause, we're going to begin some strength training, the first thing I think of is, wait a minute, that's going to hurt.
You just hit on one of the big points that people always ask about. It is a fabulous question. So here's the concept that people are fearful of. If I have pain when I'm performing an activity, how can I perform strength training without pain? And the answer is that when you're performing activities, you're going in different planes and you're using a lot of muscles to perform the activities. So what happens is, if there's already a weakened muscle and it's strained and it might be emitting pain, or it might cause other muscles to have to overwork and emit pain, that's why you have the pain while you're performing the activity. But when I'm having people perform strength training, my style of strength training, we are working on isolating individual muscles. So as a general rule, the body is fully stabilized except for the joint that's moving to strengthen the isolated muscle. As a general rule, most of the exercise I have people performing is in a seated position. Even if the exercise is done in a standing position, they're standing on one leg and they're using their two hands to stabilize themselves by holding on to a sturdy object. So the first thing to understand is that where doing activity is painful, doing strengthening is just isolating a muscle, and the rest of the body is stable, so there's no reason for the body to elicit pain. And the funniest thing is, usually when I start treating them, at the very first time, they come in, as you said, let's say that they're having problems at their shoulder, and it comes with reaching up overhead or reaching behind them or reaching to put their arm on a seat or something of that nature. So then they come in, and that very first time I say, okay, now we're going to start to do the exercise. We do the exercise, and the very first response is, wow, this is so easy to do. And the reason that it's so easy to do is because the exercise is just isolated. They're fully stabilized. They were expecting, and I think that there's a false sense right now, that exercise is kind of morphed into exercises where balance is a factor, that by stressing the stability, that's better for you in terms of developing strength. That's all a fallacy. That's actually not good. I have a general rule that says that if an exercise appears to be very difficult to perform, then I can assure you it's not a good exercise. an exercise that's very easy to perform. The actual motion, the actual creation of the movement should be so simplistic. It's in one plane. You have a set range of motion that's well within the range of motion that joint can function in. The only thing that's actually going to that's going to create a potential of difficulty is the amount of resistance that's going to be applied. And we're talking about resistances that should be no more than enough to cause the muscle to adapt by getting stronger. We're not looking to strain things. So in terms of the exercise that's performed, it is very safe, it is very stable, and I can assure you that you can perform exercises in the style that I do it, where it's isolating individual muscles in a way where there is zero pain. In fact, that idea of no pain, no gain, I mean, only a crazed person would say something like that. That doesn't make any sense. There should be zero pain when you're doing exercise. So I think that's a very, very good question, and it is oftentimes, I think, something that has led to hesitation in wanting to embrace the system. But I can assure you with all confidence that the exercises that are being performed and presented in the book, by the way, which shows start and finish pictures of every exercise, descriptions of the exercise, and the thing that I did, which I thought was very good for people, is the fact that for every exercise I presented it both in a gym style, using gym equipment, but we also presented the very same exercise with start and finish pictures showing how to do the exercise at home with resistance bands. So you don't have to go to a gym. That was never my intent. My intent was, regardless around the world where you are, if you're in a village in Tibet, if you could get, someone to deliver some resistance bands, you're going to be able to do these exercises. So we've really made it so that the exercises are available for everybody. They're very safe. You can do it. And without doing the exercise, if the cause is muscular, unfortunately, there really is no alternative to getting the pain resolved and the cause resolved, and therefore allowing you to function without pain. You really have to do the targeted exercise routine to resolve your pain.
Can you share some examples with us? I know that you've worked with patients from the age of 6, children, to up to the age of 96. There's a video on your Facebook page. So guys, go find Dr. Mitchell Yass on Facebook, please. There's a video on your page of a 96-year-old gentleman with Parkinson's doing some of these exercises. Can you give us an example of how these have changed people's lives? Is there a story you'd like to share us, an example?
I'll give you a story of the woman who probably had the greatest transformation in her life. I don't think there's anyone who could match this. It's this lady, Anne. And Anne, over a 40-year period, had a progressive scoliosis in her back. Now, almost everybody, and by the way, let me make the point that most of what I talk about, see, the danger in the situation that we find ourselves today is that this isn't just a medical issue. This has become a cultural issue. What's happened is people have heard this through television, through advertising, pharmaceutical companies. Everybody is promoting the idea your pain is arthritis, your pain is from a herniated disc. I mean, you can see it on commercials. And so what happens is it's that terrible rule that if something is stated enough times, it becomes fact, whether it's valid or not. And that's the problem. Almost everything that you hear about is actually invalid. But because it's been around so long, people do perceive it as being legitimate. So most people have been told that scoliosis causes back pain, when in fact, scoliosis is actually a symptom. The curvature of the spine is, the cause of that is the very same thing that's emitting the pain. The cause of the pain, which is a muscle imbalance between the muscles on either side of the spine. If you get an imbalance, one side gets stronger than the other side, which will cause it to shorten, and because it's attached to the spine, it pulls the spine. So the actual pain that's being experienced near the spine isn't from the vertebrae, the structure of the spine. It's from the attachment point where the muscle attaches to the vertebrae. So in Anne's case, 40 years, progression gets worse and worse. For 40 years, she's on pain medication. Horrible, horrible pain medications. Well, all the pain medication in the world couldn't take it, and she couldn't take it anymore. The pain got so bad. And she is told that she needs to have a rod put in her spine from her skull to her pelvis, her entire spine.
Wow.
She was told that it was going to take a year after that that she would be even able to get out of bed, and that she was actually told to store fat up before so that she was going to have to live off the fat. This is how perverse this situation was. And this is the legitimate answer to her situation. This was what was recommended to her. Through a series of events, I end up meeting her. And she says, you know what? I want to come. I mean, I'm willing to do anything at this point. I'm desperate. This surgery was going to be occurring within about a month from that period of time. So I evaluated her, and sure enough, I explained that it was a muscle imbalance. So we performed exercise, and Anne will attest to the fact that the very first day she came to me, she already had seen a reduction in her pain. Within 3 months, remember, 40 years of pain, 3 months of targeted exercise, she was pain-free. Not just pain-free, but completely off all pain medication.
Wow.
She ended up being so successful in her pain resolution and had such a desire to return to her life that she ended up being able to water ski. She lived on a lake, and that was her dream. That's all she ever wanted to do, is go back and water ski. So look at the difference in Resultant when you get a right diagnosis. If she got the wrong diagnosis and stuck with that, you were talking about a surgery that was going to keep her in bed for a year. My suspicion is I don't know if she would have ever recovered from that. I mean, I just can't imagine the outcome would have been just so horrible. Versus understanding the causes being muscular, 3 months of exercise, now being off of all pain medication, which she'd been on for 40 years, and at the level of function where she can now water ski and do anything she wants. You can't get a better outcome than that. And look at the difference between right diagnosis, wrong diagnosis. And that's just, an example. I mean, it just runs the gamut of people. Someone who maybe had some problems for a week or two, to people who have had pain 20 years. People who were coming in before they had any kind of intervention from the medical establishment, to people who had 5 or 6 surgeries and still had pain. It doesn't really matter where your start point is. It doesn't matter what you've done prior to coming to this method. The answer is always the same. The goal of diagnostics is to identify what tissue is emitting that pain. If it is muscular, targeted strength training is your only solution. It doesn't matter if you've been treated for structural causes. If the cause is muscular, do the targeted strength training. You will resolve your pain. It's really that simple.
Why do you think, and I'm not sure really how to ask this question, why do we persist then? Because this is so logical. It makes a lot of sense. Why do we persist in prescribing surgery, prescribing pain medication? Why do we persist in telling patients they need surgery? Why do that when there is another way? Well,
I think because right now Mitchell Yass is not exactly the most well-known name in the home. I'm a guy who has been doing this for 20 years as a medical practitioner with offices. It's only now that I'm trying to create a platform, an ability for people to find out about this. And so, you have the status quo. You have people doing what they're doing because that's what they're educated to do. You can't really necessarily blame a medical establishment who has been having these people trained in a fashion to utilize the system. I mean, the average person is going to use what they're trained to do. And even if the outcome isn't what they expect, if you have no alternative, it really leads to the sustaining of that system. The status quo, it doesn't matter what you're talking about in what area, but it's very hard to change the status quo because it's so hard to get enough momentum once some alternative is provided. That's why I'm out here. Yeah. That's why I'm doing radio shows and public television and any other form of media that I need to get enough people to create a groundswell. I don't think there's anyone who will listen to this situation, this type of methodology, and say it doesn't make sense. The question is, and the only true way that we're going to end this is that enough people have to now demand it. They'll have to say, I don't want the existing system, I want this system. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why I went directly to people, because I didn't think I'd be able to make a lot of impact, at least initially, with the medical establishment. I need people to demand this, people to utilize the system. Eventually, once this becomes the thing that people are wanting, then we can go to the medical establishment and I can try to create a methodology, a standard, which all medical practitioners will follow. We'll try to create a unified system around the Yass Method, which will then allow all medical practitioners who are addressing pain to follow the system. Once that happens, then I think it will be available worldwide. And within just a couple of years, you'll say, oh, I'm in pain. Oh, go to the Yass guy. Not, I got to get an MRI. Hopefully what will happen is someone will say, oh, shouldn't you get an MRI? And they're going to say, MRI what? That's what I'm looking for.
Of the people listening to this show who are in pain, what is likely to be the most common sight or the most common way that they are experiencing that?
But by far, there's not even a question. The lower back is the primary area, without any question. And the interesting is it's because it's like the transitional point. You use your arms, you use your legs. What's between it? The back. So it's having to support things that you're holding in your arms and allowing you to manipulate, but it's also being asked to support you when you stand. So the lower back is the most common area. I just want to give here's a really quick little understanding for people. Okay, so one of the common indicators that people describe when they know that they're having back pain is this idea that, if I sit too long and then I try to stand up, I find that I can't get myself upright, and then I have the pain in my back. What people have to recognize is that is probably the wake-up call to indicate that it has nothing to do with your spine or structure or anything, because if it was related to the spine, whether you're standing or sitting, aren't you still weight-bearing through your spine? I mean, your entire upper torso is sitting right on your pelvis, and the weight is being transmitted through your spine. So going from sitting to standing, it shouldn't be. If it was a structural component, it wouldn't matter whether you sit or stand. But what that does indicate is that there's muscles called the hip flexor muscles, and they attach from your hips directly to all 5 lumbar spine. If there's a muscle imbalance which allows those hip flexors to shorten, and you sit for a sustained period of time, that is going to allow those hip flexors to shorten, and when you go to try to stand up, they will have difficulty going back to their normal length, and they'll end up pulling on your spine. That's why you have both the difficulty in standing upright and also why you have pain at the attachment of the hip flexor to the lumbar spine, not from the structure of the lumbar spine. So that is a really, really common complaint of people. So for anyone who's listening, if that is your complaint, that if you sit for a while and then try to have difficulty standing up and you get pain centralized in your spine, look to the answer as being tightened hip flexors. It will make a world of difference. All you'd have to do is find, it's within the book, how to do the hip flexor stretches and strengthen the glutes and hamstrings, and you would see within a couple of weeks that problem will be resolved.
Is there something that you can share with us? And the book goes into great detail. And like I say, there are pictures, and I love this book because I've got pictures, I've got everything. Can you share, is there a way to share one of those hip flexor exercises on the radio?
Oh, yeah, it's actually simple. The hip flexor stretch is done by simply single leg kneeling. So if you have the ability, what you could do is you would just put a cushion down. Let's say we were going to kneel on our right knee if we were going to stretch the right hip flexor. So basically, let's say you would be kneeling in front of like a table so you could hold on to it and provide stability. You will have your knee, you'll have your left foot bent, and it's right very close to where the table is, and then you'll be kneeling on the right knee with a pillow under it. And what happens is you just you don't bend your torso forward, your torso is straight up. And all you're trying to do is move your torso towards the table, which causes there to be, your pelvis is moving forward, but your knee is obviously on the floor. So what's happening is you're actually bringing your thigh behind your pelvis. You're actually seeing the thigh going farther and farther back. That's actually creating what is known as hip extension, which is how you stretch the hip flexor. So basically, you just single leg kneel with the hip flexor that you're trying to stretch on the leg that's back, and then the one you're kneeling on, and the other leg is close to the object that you're trying to support yourself, and you kind of just move towards the object with your torso upright, and your pelvis is moving forward. The thigh ends up going farther and farther back because the knee is stabilized on the floor, and you will feel a pull in the front of the upper thigh of the leg that you're kneeling. Hold it for 20 seconds. Make sure everyone has to understand that stretching should not be painful. No pain, no gain is nonsense. And a stretch should be very mild. It's the kind of thing, if I said to hold it for 20 minutes, you'd be able to. It's very, very mild, but you're not going to hold it for 20 minutes. You're actually going to only hold it for 20 seconds. You're going to do it twice. And if you're having the pain centralized in your spine on both sides, do the stretch on both sides. And I'm telling you right now, simply doing that stretch, you'll stand up, you'll see that the pain at the low back will either be greatly reduced, if not resolved. That is the ultimate indicator that your cause is muscular, it's not structural, and that can now give you comfort and lead you to the idea that now all you have to do is strengthen the glutes, your buttock muscles, and your hamstrings, which will prevent the hip flexors from shortening any further. And then no matter how long you sit, you'll be able to pop right up from that chair and have no back pain.
I love that. So it's easy to do. It's practical. You set your intention and you do it, and you see those results almost immediately.
That's the beauty of that. That's the beauty of muscle. I think there's different areas you could work in. I think I love the idea of working with muscle because the resultant is so quick. It's almost, I have people who I treat and they're out of pain in just the treatment, one treatment. And they're stunned by that. But the point is that if you understand muscle, understand which muscles you have to address, understand how to do it with the right resistance, muscle is so pliable. It's so easy to change. You just have to understand it. And that's, I think, why I love it so much.
Can I ask you about walking as a form of exercise? Because very often that's something that's sort of, well, if you can't do anything else, you can at least walk. Is that an effective exercise? Great
question. So in all my experiences with all the people who get back surgeries and things of this nature, the doctor always tells them after the surgery, just walk. Oftentimes they won't even request any kind of post-operative treatment, which is stunning to me, because they think, the person just is going to walk. My answer to that is the fact that if walking is so good for you, and I'm sure that the person was doing some form of walking prior to the surgery, why did they have pain and require surgery at all? It's just so alive. If walking's this great thing, just go on Fifth Avenue, go anywhere in the world. Watch people walking and ask them if they have back pain, and you'll see they have back pain. So I don't understand. If walking's such this magical answer, how come everyone's still in pain? It just doesn't make sense. What people have to recognize is that walking is a functional activity. I want everyone to start understanding this concept. I don't care if you're walking on a treadmill. I don't care if you're doing a bicycle. I don't care if you're doing swimming. I don't care if you're doing Pilates. These are functional activities. They require groups of muscles. For muscles to be strong and functional and have the ability to perform function without symptom, each muscle must be strong and balanced to its opposing muscle. So if you're doing a lot of walking, you're going to end up using your front thighs too much, your quad muscles. You're not going to use your hamstrings enough. And what's going to happen is you're going to feed into an imbalance, which will cause the quad muscles to shorten. Since they're attached to the kneecap at the bottom and the pelvis on top, there is a very strong likelihood that at some point you're going to end up with either knee pain, back pain, or both. And the thing that throws people is that they're saying, wow, I'm such an active person. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to. How come I'm having pain? And the answer is that, and this is hard for people to understand, not all exercise is good. The right exercise is good. The wrong exercise is bad. And doing the right exercise is bad. So the answer is you have to understand your circumstance, and everybody has to understand their own. It's not uniform. It's not homogeneous. We have to understand each person and establish what situation, if it is muscular, what weakness or imbalance is creating that symptom. And then that has to be corrected. But the idea of doing a functional activity as the mechanism for resolving something is foolhardy, because that, in most cases, it's the inability to perform the functional activity which is leading to the weakness or imbalance, or the fact that you have the weakness or imbalance, which is leading to the symptom in performing the functional activity. So walking is never a solution. Isolated strength training is a solution. My answer to anyone who says, I want to do yoga, Pilates, aerobics, biking, hiking, any of that, is I'm all for that. But just make sure you're integrating some form of an isolated strength training program that maintains strength and balance of your muscle. Once you have that as the core, you could do anything you want. But if you think that doing those things are going to achieve strength and balance, that's foolhardy, and most likely you will end up having a symptom.
Dr. Yass, thank you so much for being on the show. We could have talked for another 7,000 hours.
I think that's true. That's very true.
Thank you so much. I hear your passion, and I hear that dream of empowering people, of kind of taking over the world and giving in the best possible way, and giving these alternatives, this strength back to people. Thank you so much for being on the show.
It was my pleasure, Karen, and I think you're doing a great thing. And you know, the only answer is we've got to reach enough people to get a saturation point. At that point, this will become the norm, and finally, everybody will have the opportunity to resolve their pain and have a fully functional life. So thank you again for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. That's Dr. Mitchell Yass, and his new book is The Pain Cure RX. You can find out more about Dr. Yass and his work at mitchellyass.com. And, of course, I welcome your feedback at karenhager.com. Thank you for listening today. Together we are spreading a little more light in the world, and a little more light is always a good thing. Until next time, I'm wishing you peace.